Bye, Tom.
Well, thank you, David. 26 years ago, our psychologist forebears brought forth on this association a new executive director, conceived in advocacy and dedicated to the proposition that all psychologists are created equal to other professionals. Oh wait, wrong speech.
Is that the one you gave in Gettysburg?
Sorry. Today we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. Oh wait, no, that was Eisenhower. Ask not what your association can do for you. Ask what you can do for your association. Oh well, I've always thought that it's kind of pretentious for me to be giving a farewell address. Isn't that what U.S. presidents and other luminaries do? But since the board insists on it, I will try to give you the benefit of some of my observations from the past 26 years, 3 months, and 19 days. Before I came to PPA, I was executive director of Common Cause, Pennsylvania, engaged in advocacy for openness, ethics, and accountability in state government. Back then, I was much more visible in the media and giving public testimony on behalf of the organization. The PPA search committee that hired me in 1987 asked if I would be happy in this role, which would inherently be more behind the scenes. I responded that I would be happy working on behalf of professionals who do as much good for society as psychologists do. And I've always been proud to be in that role. I've had the good fortune to have worked with 27 presidents, many of whom are in this room. I will start with Dr. Noel Plummer, who had the task of picking up the pieces in 1987 when the previous executive director suddenly resigned after 7 months on the job. That person had been selected over me in the search process. And Noel's job was to make it sound like PPA really wanted me after all. I agreed to take the job and have since learned to live with Sam Knapp reminding me from time to time that I was only the second choice. Thanks, Sam. Of course, I remind him back that he wasn't even interviewed the first time he applied for this job.
Thanks for reminding me.
Now, one thing an executive director needs to be good at is adapting. The presidents who followed Noel included a wide range of personalities and styles, but all were dedicated to making PPA the best organization it could be. I want to thank them all in order. Following Noel were Joe Rosenfeld, way back in 1988. Joe is over there, he is. Jack Porter, Marianne Murphy. In the 1990s, Bob Gordon, Anita Brown, Paul Delphin, Steve Ragusia, Tony Rex, Rick Small, Jeff Pincus, Linda Knaus, Peter Keller, Diane Salter, who was the bridge to the 21st century, and Emily Stevick, Don McAleer, Paul Kettlewell, Mel Rogers, the late Steve Burke, John Gavazzi, Richie Bowley, Andrea Delegati, Nancy Chubb, Steve Cohen, Mark Hogue, Judy Blau, David Palmer, and now Vince Belloir. Almost all of them are still actively involved in our association. In fact, I've been privileged to know and work with many of PPA's presidents who served before I started. Who served as president. This time in reverse chronological order. They were Connie Fisher, Leon Van de Creek, Jan Kenny, Paul Good, Bob Eigenbrod. In the 1970s, Barbara Snyderman, Bill Wilson, Betty Scheide, Joe French, Pat Brickwin, Al Bell, Jerry Resnick, and Mike Gladys, who was president in 1972-73. In all, I have worked with 41 of the 74 presidents in PPA's history. That's 55% of them. I know psychologists like statistics. For those of you who read the Pennsylvania Psychologist, I hope you don't mind if I repeat some of what I wrote in my March and June columns. PPA has transformed itself as an organization in the period since 1987. I stated in my first column in the March-April 1987 Pennsylvania Psychologist, quote, "My goals for PPA are to harness the enormous energy and dedication of the members, to keep PPA in a sound financial position and expand the membership base, to keep the association in the forefront of healthcare policy initiatives in Pennsylvania, and to make our new Harrisburg office a strong resource for PPA members with high-quality publications, continuing education programs, and other services," unquote. We have made significant strides in professional development of our members, one leg of our strategic plan. In 1987, we offered only occasional continuing education programs. Now, for the past several years, we've presented more than 100 in-person CE programs annually, plus more than 30 home study and online CE offerings, with substantial discounts for members. Our outstanding annual conventions provide a range of educational opportunities for psychologists. Another aspect of professional development is the Pennsylvania Psychologist. We have published monthly since August 1988, with a quarterly journal and a monthly update, whereas it was bi-monthly before that, and the substantive articles of direct benefit to our members have increased as well. The quarterly issues have featured themes relevant to clinical practice as well as a school psychology section. I have enjoyed my role as managing editor of the Pennsylvania Psychologist, chief proofreader, APA style guru, and grammar police. I have carried over that role to any communications that go out from the PPA office, whether it's the e-newsletter, letters to legislators, or anything else. Some think I'm a fanatic. Some of you have another diagnosis. In addition to the printed publication, which is also available on our website, we now publish an e-newsletter for the public on a quarterly basis. Our website is another source of professional development for members and the general public with a wide range of information available. We have carried out an extensive public education campaign for many years in partnership with APA, now funded, by the way, by your generous donations to the Pennsylvania Psychological Foundation. We have engaged the business community to create a synergy with psychology. This includes the Psychologically Healthy Workplace Awards, and of course, one of the most significant aspects of professional development we offer is the consultation that members get from our professional staff on innumerable issues that arise in psychology practices. My own professional development has included scores of educational sessions on association management issues, including membership development, budgeting, fundraising, public relations, marketing, governance, volunteer recruitment, government relations, and more. I earned my Certified Association Executive credential in 1997. I earned my Big Chiefs credential just through perseverance. The Board of Directors, the Internal Affairs Board, and the staff have focused a great deal on building and maintaining organizational strength, another leg of our strategic plan. Our budget has grown from $203,000 in 1985-86 to $900,000 this fiscal year. Most of the increase in revenue has come from an increase in membership and from non-dues sources. The dues amount per member is actually lower when adjusted for inflation than dues in 1986. We have a net worth of more than $900,000 and we are on solid financial footing. We have had a clean audit every year. However, in 1999, the auditors did note that the sign tacked to the wall announcing the Tom DeWall Self-Aggrandizement Fund and containing a nickel donated by Jeff Pincus was not advisable. PPA, on the other hand, increased its income and allowed us to expand from 3.5 positions to 7. And this, in turn, has enabled us to provide more services to members in terms of advocacy and the other issues I mentioned. Part of my job that didn't exist when I started was building maintenance supervisor. We own our 150-year-old office building outright and have maintained it in good shape. Though it's not in my job description, I've tried to rise to the challenges of exterminating wasps, termites, mice, and other critters, fixing doors and locks, repairing a sinkhole in the parking lot, assembling desks, replacing air conditioners, repairing cabinets damaged by water, recycling electronic equipment, driving to the office in the middle of the night to rendezvous with the police when the burglar or fire alarm goes off, and many other jobs not included in any association management books. I was fortunate to have inherited a stable organization served by Dr. Zita Levin, who was the executive officer for most of the previous 12 years. Many members regarded her as the mother of PPA, with the office being her kitchen table. The association was much smaller then, in terms of budget, staffing, volunteer leadership, and membership. When I started, PPA had 2,142 members. We grew to a high of 3,240 on December 31st, 2007, after which, due to the Great Recession, it has declined somewhat to 2,918 as of this March. We have more members participating than ever, with about 300 serving in a governance role, compared to 145 such members in 1987. Penn SciPac also saw substantial growth during this time. The PAC raised about $13,000 a year in the late 1980s. That figure rose to $55,000 in the most recent fiscal year, which has enabled us to advocate more effectively on legislative issues at the state level. Our PAC raises more money than any other state psychological association. Part of my job has been as a ghostwriter. I have written innumerable membership recruitment letters and fundraising letters for Penn SciPac and the foundation, most of them with someone else's name on them. Our governance structure has become more streamlined and effective over the years. In 1987, our primary governance body was the Executive Council with 17 members, including the presidents of 5 divisions. We had 29 committees, all written into the bylaws, 2 task forces, and no student organization. Our affiliated philanthropic organization, the Pennsylvania Psychological Foundation, was founded in 1990 to offer programming that was best done through a charitable, tax-deductible organization. A great example is the Student Scholarship Awards Program, which you will witness following this town hall meeting. In 1997, the divisions were abolished, with only the school division living on in the form of one of now 6 boards. The next year, the Executive Council was transformed into a smaller board of directors. Now most of our committees are established or dropped as needed each year by the board of directors. With the streamlined structure, the board began focusing more on strategic direction and policy decisions. Members of the board have also appreciated my unofficial role of restaurant gadfly, setting up quarterly dinners to facilitate camaraderie among the members. PPA had a student involvement committee and a student member category as early as 1979. In 2002, PPA granted student members full voting rights within the association, the first state to do that. And in 2003, PPAGS, the Pennsylvania Psychological Association of Graduate Students, was created with the chairperson and voting member of our board of directors. In 2004, the American Psychological Association of Graduate Students gave PPA the award for Outstanding State, Provincial, or Territorial Association. The other major aspect of our strategic plan is advocacy to increase access to psychological services. I started right after the Professional Psychologist Practice Act was passed, establishing the doctorate as the entry-level requirement for licensure. Those who had terminal master's degrees were given until 1995 to become licensed at that level. Although PPA supported the change to the doctoral level, we have always supported in relevant legislation those of our members who were grandfathered in at the master's level. Other than licensure, the biggest challenges over the years have been third-party payment issues and the recognition of practice to the full extent that the Professional Psychologist Practice Act authorizes. Prior to my tenure, the Freedom of Choice Law was passed in 1978, which for the first time made psychologists eligible for insurance reimbursement for treating mental health problems. It was passed over the opposition of the psychiatrists and insurance interests. In 1988, we won new legislation enabling psychologists to be participating providers in Pennsylvania Blue Shield. It allowed direct payment to psychologists rather than having the patient pay and then get reimbursed. I represented PPA in the Mental Illness Insurance Coalition starting in 1987. The coalition fought for years to pass legislation mandating mental health coverage in all health insurance contracts. Those efforts gradually turned into what we now know as mental health parity. These types of legislation were fought strenuously by the insurance lobby. Finally, parity was enacted at the federal level in 2008 with a strong effort by PPA to secure the votes of the members of the Pennsylvania congressional delegation. This 20-year fight showed the necessity of persistence in advocating for progressive change. And still, the parity law contains loopholes, so future efforts will need to focus on strengthening it through the Affordable Care Act. Medicare has been another contentious issue for more than 20 years. Psychologists were included as Medicare providers in 1990, again over the objections of the psychiatrists. Ever since the late 1990s, we have helped defeat or postpone constant attempts to lower the reimbursement rate through the 5-year rule, the SGR, or some other arcane formula. On balance, however, we have lost ground on Medicare reimbursement, with serious consequences across all third-party payment issues. These battles remain at the top of APA's and PPA's advocacy priorities, as Sam mentioned. PPA engaged in a legislative struggle from 2006 to 2009 over the prior authorizations that managed care companies and their subcontractors required. And many of you were active in that campaign. A PPA-backed bill passed the State House unanimously in 2007, only to be held up in the Senate, despite the co-sponsorship of 35 out of 50 senators. Nevertheless, because of PPA's advocacy with legislators and with insurers directly, several major managed care organizations stopped their use of prior authorizations. Unlike many other state psychological associations, PPA also fought hard for the interests of school psychologists. In 1989, PPA mounted a campaign against corporal punishment in schools, culminating in a victory 16 years later in 2005. In 1999, PPA helped derail a bill that would have limited the authority of school psychologists to discuss a variety of problems with students or to deliver health care services. In 2000, we successfully fought a proposed regulation that could have eliminated many school psychologist positions by opening the door to having lesser trained providers conduct psychological evaluations to determine eligibility for placement in special education. PPA has also had to fend off numerous attempts to restrict or impede the practice of psychologists. Recent examples were attempts to impose a sales tax on psychological services, to change the rules on treating injured workers under workers' compensation, and to restrict the ability of psychologists to supervise non-psychologists. Due to PPA advocacy, psychologists have won statutory recognition in many other laws, many of which were reserved only to physicians. Let me list just a few. Psychologists are now authorized to act as reviewers within managed care companies for their behavioral health services, to evaluate impaired physicians or nurses pursuant to their respective licensing laws, to be leaders of multidisciplinary treatment planning teams under the Mental Health Procedures Act, to receive direct referrals from workers' compensation, to maintain privileged communications with patients on the same basis as attorney-client communications, to serve as evaluators for the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation and for disability in the medical assistance and Social Security programs, to conduct child custody evaluations without fear of licensing board complaints during the process, to make return-to-play decisions for high school athletes experiencing concussions, and most recently to evaluate candidates for psychiatric rehabilitation services. And there are many more examples. In addition, psychologists are the only non-medical professionals mentioned specifically in the Healthcare Facilities Act as eligible for hospital clinical privileges, and may serve on the medical staff of private psychiatric hospitals. Other issues in which we have been successful advance the public interest directly, but psychologists' interests only indirectly. Examples are the laws promoting mental health courts and allowing minors over the age of 14 to consent to treatment. These advances have occurred because the PPA and Penn-SciPac boards of directors, as well as PPA committees, have worked hard to establish enlightened policies for the organization and to raise the necessary funds for a robust advocacy program. I've worked hard together with other staff to carry out those policies. I was a registered lobbyist for Common Cause for 10 years before I came to PPA, and have continued in that role ever since representing psychology's interests. In addition to roaming the halls of the Capitol, I've attended more than 60 legislative fundraising events every year on behalf of Penn-SciPac to build relationships with legislators. PPA won the award from APA's Division 31 as the Outstanding State Psychological Association in 1992. I believe we have built upon our accomplishments since then and have established one of the premier state associations in the country. Together with our dedicated volunteers and staff, we have realized many of the goals I had set out in 1987. This job has been so much more than a job, and I am incredibly fortunate to have been in this position and to have worked for such a good cause with such wonderful, dedicated people. Our staff members recently gave me a retirement party last month, which featured original poetry by Sam Knapp, and ending with the immortal song from Johnny Paycheck, "Take this job and shove it, I ain't working here no more." The rest of the staff chimed in on Sam's version of Big Tom. They gave me some very thoughtful gifts, including marbles for when I lose mine, a sippy cup beer stein when I get old, and this t-shirt that says, "I am silently correcting your grammar." And speaking of staff, I have been fortunate to have worked with such a dedicated team. Rachel Baturin, Katie Boyer, Ivor Brimmer, Marty Evans, Peggy Price, and the poet-psychologist Sam Knapp. All of them have been doing a fantastic job for us for long tenures, ranging from 10 years to 25 years. I do have to give a special shout out to Sam. He has helped my PPA career immensely by being a sounding board on all kinds of issues, a ghostwriter for me, a voice of reason, his encyclopedic knowledge, and his humor. We have been an incredibly productive team, and Sam has made me look good in the process. Despite the numerous challenges facing the field of psychology today, I believe PPA will help ensure a bright future for psychologists. PPA is in good hands with our very talented new Executive Director, Krista Paternostro, and our very capable volunteer leaders, beginning with President Vince Belwar and followed by President-elect Bruce Mapes. Most of you know that I will continue on a part-time basis as PPA's government relations consultant. At the end of my term in that capacity, I look forward to another retirement party. But next time we'll skip the farewell address.